Okay, so we're going to have a look at arrays and do some practice and find out about how they work, what they do, what they're used for. Just as a starter, here we have some Python code and we are creating two variables. So the question is, what happens when you run this program? So you can pause, have a think, and then I'll talk about what does happen when we run that program. Okay, so when we run this program, we actually create two variables. These are stored in the RAM, ready for us to use. So quite often the answer would be nothing happens, because you might be expecting something to appear on the screen, but in reality we're creating these two variables. So we declare two variables. They are assigned values, Fred and blogs. These are stored in RAM. So we're going to look at describing an array, understand the individual parts of an array, explain why we use arrays, and we're going to create some arrays and do some programming. Now there are two-dimensional arrays as well. We are just looking at one-dimensional arrays today, and this will be something we'll talk about in another lesson. So the need for arrays. Variables can only hold one value at a time. So if we wanted to store 5 names, how many variables would you need? So again, pause, have a think about that. So we'd need 5 variables. So there we go, name 1, name 2, name 3, name 4, name 5. So we've created those 5 variables. What if we had to store 100 names? So again, have a think about that. What impact would that have on the program and on the programmer? It would be too many. First of all, you'd have to type out 100 variables. Your code would have 100 lines of just creating variables. So the longer your code is, the slower it will run as well. So we don't really want to be doing that. So we use a data structure called an array. So a data structure is just somewhere in memory that's holding data. So a variable is a data structure that can only hold one value. An array is a data structure that can hold multiple values. So in pseudocode, we would first of all write declare forename string. So declare just means we want to make something, we want to make a data structure. Forename is the identifier, or what we're calling it, and then we specify the data type. So when we write that code, what we're hoping or what we're expecting to happen is that the processor will identify an empty RAM address, and it will label it with the identifier forename. And at the moment we haven't assigned a value, so it's holding an empty string because we specified string. And have a think what will happen now when we write this line. So we've repeated the same thing. So we're declaring a variable called surname. That's now pointing to the next empty RAM address. So surname is pointing to address 2. We've specified it's going to be a string. We haven't assigned a value, so it's holding an empty string. Now we can actually assign values. Now we've declared them. So we're assigning forename the value Fred. So what will happen is the CPU will look down. First of all, it'll realize we've got our identifier here. It will look through the RAM, through all the identifiers. Once it finds one that matches, it knows that that's RAM address 1. It can put Fred there. So what do you think will happen with this line? Again, have a think. Pause the video if you want to. Okay, so what will happen here is, again, we want to assign blogs to the identifier surname, the variable surname. So again, we will look through the RAM till we find an identifier called surname. That identifier will point to a RAM address. At the moment it stores nothing. We are going to assign that the value blogs. And now if we write output forename, again what will happen is the processor will look through the identifiers until it finds one that matches. That identifier will point to a RAM address, and it will take the contents of that RAM address and place it onto the screen. So if we're going to do this in Python, what we would do is we would just write forName equals Fred, and what Python cleverly does is the first time it encounters an identifier like this with an equals and something after it, some data, what it will do is this: it will look at the data and work out whether it's a string or whether it's an integer or whether it's a real number or whether it's a boolean, and it will actually work out what data type it is. So it's actually worked out, well, we need to store strings. When you write forName equals, this is the same as writing declare forName. So in Python, we can kind of declare and assign a variable all in one go. So it works the same way. So forName equals Fred, we're declaring a variable called forName, so it will find an empty RAM address and it will assign, it will give that identifier the RAM address number there, the address of the RAM. And here now we're assigning the value Fred into the contents. And again, have a think what will happen with the next line, surname equals blogs. Again, pause the video for a second, have a think. Okay, so again, what we're doing here is we are declaring a variable called surname, because if it's the first time it appears in the program, it's essentially a declaration. So the processor will work out that it's a string, so we need to source strings, and it will assign or give the identifier the next address, next empty address in RAM. So surname points to RAM address 2, and we're assigning it blogs. And then Python, if we wanted to print it out or output it to the screen, we just write print and forName. And again, when we write print forName, forName is an identifier. The CPU will look down through all the identifiers, find a matching one, go to the address it's pointing to, and then take the contents, pop it on the screen. But with arrays work differently because we only have one identifier. So when we declare an array, we importantly declare how long it's going to be with the data type as well. So this time declare, we've got the identifier, it's going to be an array, it's going to start at the index, will start at 0, end at 7 of a string. So we will have something like this. So we know we've got from 0 to 7, that's 8 elements in this array. So the identifier will point to each of the 8 elements, and it will just use an index. So we know score 0 is 14, scores 1 is 15, score 6 is 20, score 7 is 21. Once that's created, we can then assign the elements to the memory. So we can say, well, scores 0 is 12, scores 1 is 23, and so on and so forth. So these are the addresses where they are. So score 0 points to address 14, and address 14 is storing 12, and these are all strings. And you can see that these two are actually storing empty strings, so we could put some data in them or leave them empty. It's entirely up to the programmer. So some key terms. So an array is made up of an identifier, elements, and an index. It's really important that you can talk about those and identify how they relate to each other. So the identifier is the name of the array. So I think what would be the identifier for this? The elements of the individual, so test scores is the identifier. The elements of the individual pieces of data. So the elements are 78, 54, 67. And then the index, that's how we refer to each piece of data. So the index is simply a number that points to each element inside the array. And the index can start at 1 or 0, and if it was an exam question, it would tell you. But in the exam board pseudocode, they want the index to start at 1. So that's for Cambridge. Other exam boards would possibly have a different starting number, whether it's 0 or 1. In Python, Python arrays, the index will automatically start at 0. So we're going to get used to working with both of them. So here the index would simply be 0, 1, 2. So 0 is the first element, 1 is the second, 2 is the third. So get your board or a piece of paper and a pen, and for this array write down the identifier, the elements and the index. So you can pause, and then I'm going to go straight into the answer. Okay, so the identifier is colors, that's the name of the array. The elements are red, green and blue, the elements are the data inside the array, and the index is 0, 1, 2. So 0 pointing to red, 1 pointing to green, 2 pointing to blue. I have specified the index starts at 0 there. Okay. So we can access data in the array using the index. So print test score 0, what would that print out? So again, you can pause when I ask a question, have a go at the answer, and then play to check you're okay. So test scores 0 is going to display 78. That's the first element in the array. And what would you write to display 67? So again, pause, try the answer. Okay, so display 67. 67 is element 2. So 78 is 0, 54 is 1, 67 is 2. So if we print test scores 2, that would display 67. Okay, so what if you wanted to change element 0 to 72? So we're essentially assigning a value to, or assigning a new value to element 0. So in Python, we would say test score 0 equals 72. So we're saying take the integer 72 and write it in test score 0. So it doesn't matter if there's something there already, that will be replaced. So how might you change element 2 to 57? So again, pause, have a go. Okay, so to change element 2 to 57, we want test scores 2 equals 57. Okay, and that will change this element here to 57. Okay, so we're going to do some programming now. So you should have the PowerPoint with the questions on, which we'll use in a minute, the tasks, but these are tasks that you can have a go at without that, just to get a bit of practice in. So we want to output the message to Jane with her score using the data in the arrays. So we've got two arrays, student name and test scores. So Jane is element 0 of this array, her score will be element 0 of this array. So we can use the skills we just practiced. So there's our two arrays. We want to print, well done, student name 0, that would give us Jane. And if you're unsure, see if you can use this line, pause the video, see if you can use this line to write out the next line to print out the score. Okay, let's have a look. So print your score is test score 0, and that will output the information we need. Now I've included the declaration. So this is Python. Remember, Python automatically, so if you write a variable, the first time you write the variable and assign a value, it's the same as declaring it. It's the same with arrays. So the first time we write student name equals Jane, Pete, Ben, we're essentially declaring an array called with the identifier student name with 3 elements, and it will create the index as well. I want to keep you in the habit of writing the declaration, because that's really important for the exam, and we'll talk more about that again. So I've just included those as a Python comment, so I've declared them first, even though we don't need to. Okay, now see if you can output all of the names. So we've got three elements in here, so you can pause the video and you can see how you do with that. I'll put the answer on now, so let's look at the answer. So print student name 0, print student name 1, print student name 2. That works. But the issue is we're repeating this code. So if you ever find you're repeating something when you're programming, there's usually a better way to do it. So let's use a loop. Now, basic Python for loop for I in range 3. So that's going to go around 3 times. And the only thing I've asked this loop to do is to print I. And if we notice, I is 0 to start with. Then we go around again, then I becomes 1, then we go around again for the 3rd time and I becomes 2. Once we've done it 3 times, which is what we specified, it'll stop. And we can use I to help us pick out the information from the array. So let's have a little look at how we can do that. So instead of writing that, we can use a loop. So we've got our array. We've got for I in range 3, print student name I. So what's going to happen there is I is going to be 0 to start with. So Python loops, the I will start at 0, then it'll be 1, and then it'll be 2, and it will stop when it's repeated 3 times. So print student name I, so the first time the loop runs I will be 0, so it will print student name 0, which is Jane. Then we go around again and I becomes 2. So print student name 2, from 0 to 1, so student name will be 1, so print student name 1, which is Pete. And then the final time I will become 2, so we go around again and student name 2 is Ben, 0, 1, 2. If the array was really long and you didn't want to count, you can actually write, I know we've done this, len student name. All that will do, it will count how many elements are in the array. So if there are 3 in this case, it will just put a 3 in there for us automatically. So again, for I in range 3, remember I will start with 0, so print student name 0, which is Jane. We go around again, I becomes 1, print student name 1, that's Pete. We go around again, I becomes 2, print student name 2, that's Ben. Okay, so we're going to use this. This forms the basis of what we're going to be doing for the rest of these. So we avoid repetition, our program is shorter, it loads into RAM faster, and it's easier to understand or to fix errors. So have a go now, outputting all the names and scores. Use the data in the arrays and use a loop. Obviously you can rewind the video a little bit and look at the last page if you need a little bit of help. So pause it now, have a go at that, and I'll put the answer on now. So here we go, we have got our loop for I in range 3 or for I in range len student name. Doesn't matter either one because they're both the same length. And we're just printing out, well done, student name I. Your score is test scores I. So first of all it will be 0, so it will be student name 0, test scores 0, which is Jane, and 78. Okay, so give that a try. Right, now we're on to task 1. So what you've got is on the PowerPoint with the tasks, you've got the 2 arrays here. So output the Monarch and the dates of the array using the arrays provided. All I suggest you do is pause it now, have a go at the task, and then I'm going to pop the answer on and just quickly talk about it. Okay, so we're just going to have a loop for I in range. Now I counted them as 22, but you would all know it's probably better to do for I in range len Monarch or len rain. They're both the same length, which will be 22. And print Monarch I, rain I. So it'll be Monarch 0, which is Henry VIII, rain 0, 1509 to 1547, and then it'll be 1, which is Edward VI, 1547 to 1553, and so on and so forth. You could make it a little bit more presentable by having some text inside your print statements. So something like maybe have Monarch I, and then in comma, and then in quote marks, reigned from, close quote marks, comma, rain I. Anyway, something like that. But this works. So try it if yours didn't work. Okay, task 2. Ask the user to enter Monarch and then search the array, outputting the dates of the range. So we know now the first thing we need to do is to ask the user to input something, and then we're going to have a loop that's going to go over the Monarch array, comparing what the person typed in with each element. I'm going to put the answer up. If you want to have a go at it, have a go at it, but I'm going to put the answer up, talk you through it. That might help if you have a look at that and then have a go at it. But either way, it's up to you. Pause it now or pause it in a minute. So we need to create a variable to store what they're going to type in. So search, that's the name of the variable. You could call that what you want. Important that your variables mean something. So I could maybe call it Monarch search perhaps. Anyway, search equals input, choose a ruler. Now we're going to loop over the Monarch array. So we're going to go around 22 times, but again that could be len Monarch in there. And this is the important key part here. If search, so that's the Monarch they typed in, double equals, that means compare either side. So if search is equal to Monarch I, so Monarch I will be initially Monarch 0, which will be Henry VIII. So let's say they typed in Edward the 6th there. So if search, which is Edward the 6th, is the same as Monarch I initially, which would be Henry VIII, that's false. So this bit of code here won't run. So then we go around again and I becomes 1. So again, if we typed in Edward the 6th here, so if Edward the 6th is equal to Monarch 1, well, Monarch 1 is Edward the 6th. This now is true, so we now print out this data and print Monarch I reigned, comma, reign I. So that will print out Monarch 1, which is Edward the 6th, ruled from reign 1, which is 1547 to 1553. So have a go at that. I put a not found message if the monarch is not found. So again, you can build on the code you've just done. If you've got that working, pause it, have a go, and then come back to this, because I'm going to explain the solution now. If you're not sure, have a look at the solution and then try and apply it. So we've got our code here, and what we're doing is, so if the search matches the monarch in the array, we're going to print the data out. We can assume that if they don't match, it wasn't found. So we're going to print out monarch not found, and that will work. However, you can see here I typed in Anne, so Anne is in here somewhere. There we are, Queen Anne. And what it's doing is, though, so it's comparing it with the first one, Henry VIII here. So that comparison is false, so we don't do that. But then it's doing the else, it's printing not found. It's got Anne and found that, but we don't want all these to print out. The other problem you'll find is if you just put in a random name that's not in here, it'll just print out monarch not found 22 times. So this is, although this sort of works, we need to sort of improve it a little bit. So a lot of you might initially do this and try it and then realize actually there's a better way. So let's have a look at the better way. So again, go back if you want to and pause it on the previous slide, but have a look at this. So what we're doing is we're using a flag. Flags are really useful, particularly if you're searching for something. So search is input choose a ruler. We're just adding 3 lines in here. Found equals false. That's our flag because we haven't found it yet. So we need an initial value. So we're creating a variable called found. It's a boolean. It's currently false because we haven't found it. Here, if our comparison is true, what are we going to do? We're going to set found to true. So we now know we found it. We know we found it. We now don't need that else we had on the last program. All we need to do is let this loop keep going around, and if we find a match, found will be true. So we know we found it, and we can do something with that. If we don't find a match, found will stay at false. So that's really helpful because once the loop's finished going around, we can just say, well, if found is equal to false, so remember the double equals is comparison in Python, please search again, or monarch not found. Okay, have a go at that, get it to work. So flags are really important. So we set them to a value, and then we can then change the flag whenever we want to. Okay, so task 4. I think this is just a little bit of practice. So what will be the output from the code below? So array index starts at 0. So pizza toppings, there's our array. We've got I equal 4. Print pizza topping I plus 1. So pause the video, write down an answer, and let's have a look. Okay, so if I is 4, 4 plus 1 is 5. So let's have a look. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that should print out that string there, 5. Okay, let's have a look at another one. So I is equal to 8. I is I minus 5, print pizza topping I plus 1. So pause video, have a go at this. Right, let's look at the answer. So I is 8. I is I minus 5, so 8 minus 5 is 3, so we know I is 3. Pizza topping 3 plus 1, that's 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That should print out pineapple, and it did. Okay, so that's an important bit of information to do the next task. So task 4, you've got this code. What I want you to do is to edit the code and output the name and the cost of the searched for topping. So the user will enter a topping. We then loop over the array, and if we find a match, I'm just printing found here, but I want you to print out the the name and the cost of the topping. Okay, and we call this a linear search because we search over each element one after the other, starting at the first one, so in a line almost. Anyway, so pause the video, have a go at that. More info on the next slide. Okay, so what we're looking to do is, and I've put this all on one line, you could put it on multiple lines. So the name of the topping is the topping that they typed in, so that's one way to access it. So I'm printing out top choice, so if they typed in ham, that would print ham on the screen. Then I've got some text, is, and then I've got some more text, I've got a pound sign, and then I need the cost. Now, if I know that, so the ham is pizza topping I, so it would be 0, 1, 2, so this would be, I is going to be 2 at this point, if these are a match. I know that the cost is the next element, so it would be +1, 2 + 1, but in our code we're accessing the array using I, so I + 1, so basically that will print the next element. So for example, enter a topping, let's say we type in cheese, we then loop over the length of the array. If top choice equals pizza toppings I, so is it 0? No, that's a false, so we go around again. Is it 1? No, that's a false, so we go around again. Is it 2? That's a false. We go around again. Is it 3? Element 3? No, that's a false. Is it 4? No, that's a false. So we're looking for cheese. Is it at 5? No, that's a false. We go around again. Now, if top choice is equal to pizza topping, so I typed in cheese. When we get to this element, it's true. I've forgotten which one it is now. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I is a 6 at this point. So that's true, and I is 6, and we just print out top choice, so I typed in cheese, is pounds, pizza topping I + 1, 6 + 1, so that's pizza topping 7, well, which is 2, so that should print that out. Okay, so have a go at that. So that was task 4. Task 5, ask the user to enter a product number, search the array, and output the product name and price. So you can have a go at that. I'm going to go through the answer now as well. Okay, so here is the answer to that one. So we are, just as we did before, we are inputting a variable, that's what they want to search for. We're looping over the array. If we find a match, we can print out found, but we want to print out the product name and the price. So I've added print name products I, print cost products I, and if we run that and we type into search for 0002, so what's happened is that's not a match, that's not a match, that's not a match, that is a match. So that's element 0, 1, 2, 3, element 3, so that is true. So I is 3 at this point, but if we print products 3, it's just going to keep printing that out again. So we need a way to print out the name, which is the next element, and then the price, which is 2 elements after. So if you got this far, see if you can edit this code so it actually prints out the name and the cost. Okay, pause it, have a go. Let's have a look at the next slide for the answer. So we're actually printing I + 1 and I + 2. Okay, so sometimes you could be given these all in a single array, or they could even have been 3 arrays, one for the products, one for the product codes, one for the product, one for another one for the price. Okay, but in this instance we've got them all in one array, so we need to actually just add to the value here. Okay, right, task 6, output not found message if the product is not found. I put hint user flag, so look back at what we did before, see if you can edit your working code to get that to work. Right, pause it, have a go. Let's go for the answer. So I'm using a flag, so we're setting found to false. Once we found it, we're setting it to true, and once we've done all this, if found is still false, we're outputting not found. So once you get those building blocks, it's fairly straightforward to do. And task 7, now with task 7, if you've got up to task 6, I'm pretty happy, but task 7, if you want to have a go at it, please do. Output a message asking if they want to change the price of the product. If they do, ask them for the product number. So you're going to search the array then and ask them for the new price, update the array with a new price, output the product name with a new price. Okay, so output a message to the user, ask them if they would like to change the price of the product. If they do, ask them for the product number and then ask them for the new price. You then need to search the array to find the product number and update the array with a new price, and then output the product name and the new price. Pause it, have a go, and I'm going to go for the answer for you just to give you some pointers. So here is the answer. So I've got a variable called choice, asking if you want to change the price. If that's true, remember double equals means compare. If that comparison is true, we're going to ask them for the product number. So we've got that as stored as product. Maybe it should be called product num, something like that perhaps. We're going to then loop over the array, and we're going to see if we can find that product number. So if products I is equal to product, which these typed in, if I find a match, I'm going to ask them to input the new cost for, and I'm actually putting on the screen here the name of the product. So let's say we found the product at 6. That was our match. 6 matches the product number. I know that cake, or the next element, is the name of the product. So I plus 1. I've noticed we've got Charles II in there, so I need to edit him out. But anyway, that's fine. And then what I'm doing is they've typed in that cost, and I'm changing I plus 2. So that's I plus 2 is the price with the cost they've just typed in. Okay, and so I can output the information at the end, because don't forget this loop will just quickly continue finishing off, so I is going to keep changing till it's finished. I'm storing I's position because I can use that now to print out all the data at the end. So have a look at that, pick your way through it, and please ask me if you have any questions on how it works. Okay, I think that's it. Good luck with these, and see you in lesson.